If they don't laugh at something, you can cut it and never do it again. So, you know, it's completely in their hands. They edit it for you, really. There's a lot of crosses. Or it may be.
When you first start, the most frustrating thing as an act is when people say to you, oh, that was very good, you have some very nice jokes, but you haven't found your voice yet. And it's so frustrating because you know that they're right, and you know that to find your voice is, you know, the most important thing as a comic, but also one of the hardest things.
The task was to write something where you imagine the world as if it were different. You could redesign the world in any way you chose, and it could be anything. It could be silly, political. Excellent. Let's hear it for Dave.
I was watching the other day, recently we've had the local elections have happened and the Eurovision Song Contest has happened. And I felt it would be much better if they did the election coverage much more like the Eurovision Song Contest. Hello, Sunderland South, can you hear me? Hello, Hugh. Yes, you're doing a brilliant job. It's been a great show this evening.
Methods will vary from comedian to comedian, and actually the best method is the one that grows organically out of your own personality in a way.
Liberal Democrats, 8 points. Liberal Democrats, 8 points. Le Démocrate libéral, 8 points.
I put the students on stage a lot, in front of an audience. Thanks. A lot. They perform for the first time 10 days into the module. They start, and 10 days later they're in front of an audience of 200 people.
I like the pause gag in the you know, because they always do that. You know, if you were building a longer piece, you could certainly play on that. And in fact, it's the sort of thing where you could pause for a bit, and then before you get to the bit, you go, they always pause like that, don't they?
There's 3 basic strands of comic theory, OK? There's theory that emphasises aggression and superiority. You know, you laugh at somebody.
I was filling in a form for a friend the other day, and I said, what's your postcode? They said, Charlie Tango 2, 7 November Hotel. I said, what? She went, oh, can you just repeat it back to me so I know you've got it down right? Cock, twat, 2, 7, knob, head. Get out.
There's comedy which is about incongruity. That's another theoretical strand. It's about absurdity, the unexpected.
As I think the human body is a missed opportunity. I think, for example, 2 holes that do pretty much the same thing. I think one of them smells traditional things like breakfast in the morning, coffee, kippers, farts, that kind of thing, like noses usually smell. The other side could smell emotions.
And then the third one is release of tension. The classic theorist will be Freud, and Freud argued that there are 2 kinds of jokes: innocent jokes, which are just, you know, playful and fun, and then tendentious jokes, which have a deeper kind of psychological purpose. You don't have to buy that hook, line and sinker to realise that a difficult or edgy subject is going to create a certain tension in the audience. And having created that tension, if your punchline is funny, the laugh is bigger.
I went to Blackpool, and I went round looking for rooms, and I knocked on a door. And the old lady came to the door, a nice lady, a little bit and some more, not quite so much, and then perhaps. And that's all I want, just a little encouragement.
If you go back 60 or 70 years and listen to recordings of Max Miller, he has to find how explicit his innuendo can go before it's too explicit. And his skill was being able to walk that tightrope.
Shall I start it off, Ivor? Shall I start it off?
Yes, you start it off.
I'll start it off, and you'll creep in, won't you? You'll creep in. I started courting a smashing fan dancer. To marry her, that was my plan. Now it's all off with the smashing fan dancer. She fell down and damaged her fan. Here!
When he talks about the fan dancer who fell down and damaged her fan, and there's 19 seconds of outraged laughter. You can tell there's some serious tension being released there. And normally the response to that is, I think I've found your level.
I did a gig on the night of Princess Diana's funeral. The manager said, do you want to start with a minute's silence? I said, no, I'll integrate my own silences through the act, like I always do. But I went on and I did, you know, I said stuff like, you know, Elton John, I watched the funeral today, Elton John, you know, he should have done, you know, I'm Still Standing. I just sold a flower shop. I'm really upset about that. I put all my money in landmines. It was all that kind of, you know. And there seemed to be a great sense of release in the audience. Maybe it's okay to laugh about it. He's not joking about her death.
The most common question after a show is, what's the most offensive joke? What's the worst joke? Now, I don't think I can tell you the most offensive joke, because I think offence is taken, not given. That's not just an expression. That is how it tends to work. Different people take offence at different things. So I can't tell you what the most offensive joke is. But we could see.
I would never do jokes about Jesus Christ, but I think doing jokes about Christians is fine. You can do jokes about Jews, but to have a go at maybe the Torah or things that Jews really feel they hold sacred, I think you're just causing offence.
I've got a friend that recently had an abortion. But on the positive side, Slimmer of the Month. Well, I've got a few of you.
You can do a very, very funny, humane, you know, or taboo-breaking in an interesting way joke about cancer, or you can do a really kind of brutal, unfunny, mean one. You know, it's not the subject, it's the joke.
If men fall asleep directly after sex, why is it so difficult to catch a rapist?
There are very few subjects that you can say that is absolutely not a subject for comedy. You absolutely cannot talk about that, because if it's treated intelligently and met with intelligence in its audience, it can, you know, you can find ways of discussing almost anything.
No one offended. Right, let's bring out the big guns. Hitler and Pol Pot. But let's try and see the good in the bad. And both Hitler and Pol Pot managed to conduct an awful lot of medical research without hurting any animals. I put it to you, if you're not even a little bit offended, you haven't really understood that.
When people complain about comedians being rude or offensive, to me, they miss the point entirely. That's the function. The function of a comedian is to reinvigorate us with rudery. I am the only person who could be called an intellectual who would go to Chubby Brown and find him funny. Of this I am not ashamed.
The outrageous Roy Chubby Brown.
Hello, you all right in the city seats? Wankers! By the way, girlfriend. We fucked her. No, we have. There's some lovely women in this room tonight, but I'm not a ladies' man because I only have a 4-inch cock. And some girls don't like it that thick, do they?
Foulest, filthiest stuff you'd ever heard, and people adored it. It was disgusting about women, and who were the people who loved it most? Women. But it finished when she came out of the pier. It was over. We licensed it to happen there and then stop.
You should always marry an ugly woman, oh yeah. Because if you marry a bonny girl and she leaves you, you're heartbroken, right? You marry an ugly girl, she leaves you, who gives a fuck?
Comedy is there to say, this is the world, this is who we are beasts, rejoice in the fact that we are beasts. What function, in the end, what function do we have? We copulate, we propagate, that's it.
Bernard Manning!
I used to go and watch Bernard Manning in Manchester, in his club. You know, you were a fool to have gone in there if you knew you were going to be offended. You went in there in order to be offended.
The fellow walked in, he said, I feel a bit under the weather, doctor. He said, I'll give you a thorough examination. He said, you've got VD. He said, must have got my lavatory seat. He said, you must have chewed it. He said, your gums.
Bernard Manning was a pure joke teller, and he told jokes as well as anybody has ever told jokes. But he would get massive cheers from his audience every time he said anything hateful or racist, and it's uncomfortable because you kind of go, why would you need to do that?
You've only got to just talk about political correctness to my audience and they all think it's hysterical.
Have you seen when the black people turn up and win all the fucking medals? The 100 yards is always 9 black people and a fucking Russian. What is the point of that fucking Russian? There's no point, is there? Take your mask. Gone. The Russian. Check the mirket.com.
Yeah. You haven't really changed, have you?
Of course I have. I don't do jokes anymore, and I have changed.
I'm not doing
but you're saying that, Alan, but you haven't seen me.
No, it's true. I haven't seen you yet. But
that's all my life. People say that. Oh, you're that bloke who does the.
No, but I don't say that. What I say is that I'm actually saying, in a way, you could say, are you true to who you are, rather than actually trying to
accommodate.
Yeah,
I am true to who I am now. People look at me as if I am that fossil that was from the 70s and should have stayed there. But of course, I have a job to do, and there's still millions and millions of people that want to see comedians of a certain age.
So, Jim Davidson or Ben Elton? Where do you stand?
Jim Davidson anytime. Jim Davidson anytime, and that doesn't mean I have to like Jim Davidson particularly. Ben Elton was like the end of comedy for a period. Ben Elton tried to make comedy out of what wasn't funny. Ben Elton thought you could clean up comedy. There's no point in cleaning up comedy. That's not what it's for.
Yes, indeed. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this, the first of our new series, which is now, of course, called Friday Night Live. The title has changed, but very little else has changed. In fact, very little else has changed. In the world, we still have the same government. Even though we had an election, we have the same government. Mrs. Thatcher stormed Parliament for the 3rd time. We better be careful. If she wins it again, they're going to have to let her keep it. Now,
I was about 12, and Ben Elton came on the scene, and I can't even explain. I almost get teary thinking about it. I just felt like I had found my yellow brick road. You know, he was the Wizard of Oz.
Now, I have to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. I must tell you the truth. I nearly didn't make it to the show tonight. I nearly did not get here. I almost got flummoxed at the very start of leaving my home, you see. It happens every week. I leave my house. Oh, yeah, by the way, I've got a house here. I own a house. Oh, my God, the hypocrisy of it, screams a certain newspaper. Calls himself interested in a welfare state and he's got somewhere to sleep. What a hypocrite. He ought to sleep in a cardboard box. If he says he supports the National Service, why doesn't he cut his head off and kill himself then?
I was obsessive about Ben Elton, and he was political, and what he said made sense to me. All the stuff that people were saying about Thatcher, all the anger, suddenly it was in funny form. And I could relate to it, and I got it.
It was exciting at the beginning. It was exhilarating at the beginning because he was saying about Thatcher what other people were not saying about Thatcher. It died away when he would, he'd stand on the stage and you'd think, hang on, this is a speech to a trade union. This is no longer funny. The unforgivable thing, I think, for a comedian is that he steps out of comedy and enters, the sphere of current affairs or politics. It's not just that it's not funny anymore. It's just that he's forgotten that he's involved in he has a dramatic function.
I found myself in the Comedy Store in London doing a topical comedy show called The Cutting Edge. And lo and behold, 2 rows from the front, bang in the middle, was none other than BBC comedy legend Jim Davison. It's rather off-putting, to be honest with you, having his smiling red alcoholic face sat there. But he listened to the show and he laughed, and then he came to chat to me at the bar afterwards. And I really have nothing in common with Jim Davison. I mean, I'm Asian, he's a supposed racist. I'm gay, he's a supposed homophobe.
But you liked him when you were there.
I didn't particularly like him.
He thought you did, you see.
Well, they were all right, but it's like watching kids playing at it, isn't it? Oh, no, I'm Indian, I'm gay, real obvious, awful, homophobic jokes.
I know, but then you were very, very rude about him, weren't you?
Well, I only repeated what he said. He called himself the Indian Puff, so that's what I referred to. In speech marks, I spoke to the Indian Puff.
He called me an Indian Puff. Indian Puff? How politically incorrect is that? I'm a British Asian Puff, and it's not the same thing. And he also called me a jealous socialist cunt.
When that guy walked on stage and said something about, this is the guy before the Indian Puff, he said, someone mentioned Jade Goody, and he said, I'm glad she's dead, she's a fucking racist, okay? And then decided to take the piss out of a girl from Sweden and did all anti-Swedish material about porn and sucking dicks and things like that, Swedish people in porn films do. Now, talk about hypocrisy of those 3